Today we're being joined by the Geelong AFLW coach, Dan Lowther. Dan, thanks for coming on.
No worries, Coops. Good to be on.
Appreciate it. Now, obviously, you've been in football for a very long time, obviously playing for Geelong, then being through some assistant coaching, and now you're the Geelong AFLW coach. First off, I'll start with your football playing career. Obviously, in the draft in 1955, is it? How was that time for you as a player? Obviously, the draft was obviously a lot different to it is now. How was that time for getting into the football system?
Oh, look, it was an exciting period. Like, it was that kind of that intermittent part where the AFL was shifting from probably semi-professional into professional in my time. So I was lucky enough to play in Three Flags with the Northern Knights in the under-18s, which were just so many really talented players who all, went on to get drafted and have, varying careers, a lot of positive careers and long careers. And to come to Geelong, I was a Collingwood supporter growing up, so to come to Geelong, it really wasn't on my radar. But, to wait to pick 61 back in the day where they did every pick, up until the very last pick live, it was a bit of a long wait, but I was happy to get picked up and to come to Geelong. And at the time, they were coming off a grand final loss to Carlton in '95. So my first pre-season was off the back of their grand final loss. So they were a really good side, and to come in and have Ablett Senior and Gary Hocking and Paul Couch, and there was a huge number of genuine, talented, established players. It was always going to be tricky to play, but I got my chance, which was great. I really enjoyed my 6 seasons here, and would love to have gone for longer. But it was a really enjoyable period of my playing career in the AFL, and I managed to get 30 odd games and showcase what I could do. But Geelong has pretty much been my home ever since.
That's good. So you play obviously 34 games. Do you remember your debut game very fondly, say, compared to any other game, considering it's the first one?
I remember the game against year 2, so it was nice to play a home game as your first game. I was very close in my first season to playing round 1, and I was an emergency for round 1, and it wasn't until like round 16 in the year after that I got to play my first game. So it was a bit of a long wait in between, but well worth the wait. I didn't do a hell of a lot, to be fair. It's a bit different now. Obviously, the rotations, the players are on and off the ground every 2 or 3 minutes. But I had to wait till late in the third quarter to come on the ground. And but you do remember it was a great memory. And there's some other games too during that time where you're playing at the G, and those kind of experiences which you can't really fault. So lots of good memories from it.
That's right. 34 more games down than many people can ever say, though.
Well, there you go. I'm lucky in that regard, aren't I?
Yeah, true. Now, my coaching career started, or at least from a VFL level, as an assistant coach at Geelong Reserves in 2015. How did that coaching journey start for you post-footy career?
Well, I went into teaching. So during my AFL career, I studied education. So I always had an interest in working with kids and around coaching, education, kind of work hand in hand. And then hadn't really considered coaching until I was asked to come down to the Geelong Falcons and just support their under-18 program back in, must have been around 2013 or 14. So a really talented list at the time with Darcy Parish and Paddy McCartan and a lot of lists that we could name. But I was just there as a development coach, just to kind of get my hands there in regards to just passing on some knowledge around the game, but also just because I love to help, and coach. Kind of went from there into an assistant role at the Falcons, and then I was asked to do a role here in the VFL men's, which I gained and had 4 seasons, I think, as an assistant. So I did every line, which was great. I Shane over, and then I took a role as a football analyst in the AFL men's team full time off the back of that, and then COVID, and obviously there were cuts made. So I was last in, first out, which was all teams had to go through those difficult decisions. And for me to go back into education was fine. And then Paul Hood, who was the AFLW coach, reached out and said, "Look, if you're still interested in coaching, we'd love you to come down and be an assistant, which, at the time I was like, I am interested, but I've just kind of left the place. It's going to be probably tricky to go back in, but I'm glad I did. My first season as assistant, I loved it. It was just like, this is the place where you can get the most gratification from an educational learning perspective. And then, when the job came up to apply for, I did, and it was a bit of a process, but Raptor went through it, and I was lucky enough to get it.
And then a full circle moment, and now you're the Geelong AFLW coach. When you were first approached to be the AFLW coach, how was your initial reaction, and how was the process around that time?
Well, when I was first approached to do it, I was lucky. Paul had coached and done an amazing job. I don't think Paul gets enough credit for just starting the program from a VFL perspective when they were preparing to enter the AFLW at the right time. Just how much work had gone into preparing the program itself. So a ton of work had been done prior to me coming in. When Paul was leaving, he endorsed me to apply for it, which was a great thing to do from his perspective, so which certainly helped. But there was some big expectations on the club in regards to that just need to start to show improvement and start asserting themselves as a genuine team in the AFL competition. So that was always going to be a challenge, which I was really ready for, and that's how I presented it. The standards piece for me and my philosophy around my expectations around performance were pretty clear. And, when I found out I got the position, I was obviously over the moon. And it was always going to be a challenge to realign and reset the list to get the right people, the right program, the right strategy in play. And there's some amazing people here at club who I've worked with closely to get that alignment right. And our list looks dramatically different when I first started 3 seasons ago to what it is now, which it's full credit to everybody who's supported me in that role. But the wheels have been moving really fast in the last couple of years.
So obviously last year the girls obviously made it to the prelim and were really, really close to making the grand final. How did you overall assess the team season last season?
Oh, I thought it was a really positive year, clearly, to make a prelim. It's an interesting fixture and format at AFLW where you don't play everybody. There's a lot of playing movement in between teams. So from year to year, season to season, there are things that you're prepared for, but you're not quite sure how they may work out. But I think what we've done really well as a program is we've stuck to our strategy around performance and our standards level. So for the girls to win 2 games into 7 games into making a prelim, winning 2 finals in 2 seasons, that's the progression. We want to show that we're consistent in our performance. And it was an amazing experience for the group to learn from, but also they're fully aware, and we're fully aware, that there's no guarantee we'll get there again. But what we can guarantee is that we can learn from what we experienced, and we can be best prepared to compete again, which is what we're after.
So obviously in the trade period, obviously brought in Bella Smith from the Gold Coast. So what was some of the reasons behind wanting to select Bella Johnson obviously moved on to the Eagles?
Yeah, so Bella was one that kind of fell into my lap in the end in regards to she had some home ties to Warrnambool and Geelong, which was great. She'd done an ACL, unfortunately, in her time in Brisbane, but she'd been a part of an elite program, a program that's been successful for a long period of time, and who are very fast, very fit, very fundamentally strong team. So, for her to want to find opportunities somewhere else, there's a need for us to keep building our midfield. So we thought maybe she'd be a really good fit to support our midfield and develop her own game as well. She's only very young still. I think she's only played 1 game of AFLW footy off the back of injury. So she's hungry as ever, just as much as our younger players who have been around our program for a couple of years are also very hungry. So they should, and they are getting along really well. She's already in here training and preparing, which is so. I expect her to be driving again the standards. Her standards already are very visible to see, and they're fitting with our strategy. So I'm very happy to have her, and obviously with Chantal and Bryde in the draft. A couple of younger players that we can work towards over a couple of seasons to build on. Outside speed, a key forward, and then we got lucky enough to get Kate Kenny over in Ireland as a international rookie. So you know, someone who's exceptionally good at Gaelic, and again, we've seen with Aisling and Rachel and our Rose, like it's very transferable. So we're excited to see what she can bring.
Yeah, Anne Rose Kennedy, a name that comes to mind, obviously was in the squad last year, played in the pre, and obviously it would have been a really different debut for her. You know, that's a debut in a big game like that. Yeah,
well, she was funny. Like she's like, it is what it is. Like I don't know anything different. It's just a game. You know, she doesn't know the game's history enough to get worried about it's a prelim. So for her, it's just like, oh well. She's quite a professional person. She's very level-headed around what the occasion might be all about. So for her, it was like she'd done a long rehab. She'd been training for about 4 or 5 weeks, and she'd been training exceptionally well, consistently beating our defenders with her our attackers with her defensive play. So it wasn't like, oh, look, you know what, before you get back to Ireland, we'll give you a game to see what it's like. It's a big game for us, but her attributes of height and speed were important. So she was brilliant. Like she showed in that time she was on that she could, you know, she was fast, she was agile, she was strong in her tackle pressure. So she's back in Ireland at the moment, currently playing really well in GAA. Yeah, fit and healthy, which is positive. And she didn't really care. She's like, it was just a game. It was just my first game. Who cares? I'll move on. Yeah, so I love that attitude. It was good.
So now, can you give us a bit of insight into how the draft and trade period was for you to get everything that you get? A little bit about behind the scenes about how the trades work. Obviously, Annabelle Johnson's leaving and Bella coming in. Were they decisions that were really easy to do? Was there a lot of haggling with class about picks and everything like that? Tell us a bit about.
Yeah, it's a bit of a drawn-out process. Like we've got people here who do that behind the scenes. There's a lot of conversations and time between our trade period, whereas the AFL is pretty. It's well documented. It's over a few days done. You know, a couple of weeks done. Whereas the AFLW, it's a bit drawn out. So what we needed is, as I mentioned before, we need to work on building our capacity around a midfield to be consistently harder to play against that space. So when Bella was available, you know, that worked in our favour. Being our draft, you know, our first draft wasn't until well down the list off a successful season. So a lot of the higher end talent was already taken. That might have been, you know, good for us to focus on, but we couldn't have focused on the first 10, 15 picks. So, you know, and you throw in compensation picks from the last couple of seasons as well. Like a lot of the talent that was readily available wasn't going to be accessible. So that's why we looked at, you know, current players on lists that we could bring in from other clubs that might be able to support us. Having Annabelle Johnson go to WA was a bit of a shock, but I understand why she wanted to leave. Like she's obviously got family ties back in WA, and you know, working with Daisy would be exciting as well for her. And she's just a ripper, so she's gonna, you know, she'll help their defence for sure. But you know, we just had to make sure that our strategy around our draft was to get the best available talent, and you know, heading to Ireland was to make sure that we were getting the best talent that we think could support our current list. So we didn't think it was going to be in the draft for now, but you look at this year's draft prospects going into the draft at the end of this season, it's getting stronger and stronger. So AFLW is going to be exciting, you know, competition over the next 3 or 4 years. But yeah, our strategy just gone was to look at the draft. You know, has worked well for us the last couple of years.
Sure, and obviously good timing to have you on too. Obviously, the AFL came out around inside versus the All Stars team. I'm sure that be a game that management could be heavily focused on to see the best of the best youngsters and also the best other players around that age as well.
Yeah, we got there's Jo Sutherland, who's currently on the VFLW list, so she's playing for the All Star team, which is great for her, and it does allow, like, you know, the upcoming prospects to show their wares. And you know, you look at the academy side, like they're absolutely gifted with talent. Like there's so much football talent in that team that, you know, that, like I said, that this draft is going to be quite deep. So, you know, we're hoping that we don't get a high pick off the back of a successful year again. That would be our first you know, wish list. But yeah, again, we might need to look elsewhere if the draft, if we don't get what we can get from a talent perspective, because yeah, it's going to take a few years for the pathway system to be consistently delivering the talent that's required for the game to keep adapting and changing. But it'll get there. It's exciting already. You know, you look at I'm going to head to the game tomorrow and have a look at that at Icon Park, and should be a good game to watch.
How do you feel how the AFLW draft is, say, compared to the men's in terms of the state drafts? Do you feel like it's fine how it is, or it should be everyone should be national these state?
No, look, it's served. I think to me, it's served its purpose. Like, it needed to support, the Victorian teams, the in-state teams, the way it was done early days. Giving the players a chance to opt to stay local or move in state has been a positive one too. But yeah, I'm a big believer that it needs to go national. Like, as the talent starts to progress, look at Adelaide and South Australia, WA, Queensland. They're quite big states with lots of football talent that they can access through academies or Waffle, Sandful. The way their second tier structure is probably better than the way the VFL is structured to the AFLW. Just getting more access to games and experience, and the pathways have been well established for a long period of time. So I'll be really keen for a national draft. I hope the AFL are pushing for that for this draft, because there's just so much talent interstate that, if we can distribute that and disperse it across the clubs, or at least get access to that talent, I think it's going to support the growth of the game.
Sure. I mean, yeah, obviously you mentioned about SA dominating. I mean, you can just list off everyone that Poilade drafted from the Chantal, Georgie, so many big names for them. Obviously, Bryde goes to the Bulldogs. There's just so much at SA. Now, list spots, Dan. Obviously 30 at the moment. Do you feel over time it should end up progressing to around what the men have around football? Or is it okay with how it is now?
It's going to have to increase. I think it will have to increase. So there are different ways they can potentially do that through, whether it's through the draft. I think with the talent, maybe the draft pool not being as deep with talent, there's ways we can maybe manipulate it with trainer-ons being potentially able to support the list size. But I think with injuries, we've seen it in the last couple of years with COVID or injuries. Like, there are teams who look 4 or 5, and all of a sudden 4 or 5 rolls into 8 or 9, and then it's very difficult to field a team. So, where those extra players come from is really important. Now, whether we can support it with salary cap and soft cap to have 40 players on the list, I don't think that's right now. But certainly, as the games increase in regards to season length, we're going to need the players to be able to support that change as well. So yeah, it'll get there, I think. But it'll be. It's important that the growth of the pathways keeps.
Now, I have to ask this because I'm sure it's something that not only Geelong tried, but Essendon tried. You may know where I'm going with here. I was having Georgie Prepaskis at the club. Have you ever tried to pull Maddy aside? I've heard from Essendon's side of things they would love to have Georgie, and I'm assuming you're with Maddy.
Yeah, it hasn't really been brought up, to be fair. Like, we won't joke about it every now and then, but we're very lucky to have George. And they're two similar but different players. I look at Mads, and she's a bit of an on-field general, and she's exceptionally gifted with her decision-making and her fundamental. And whereas Georgie's, she's catching up very quickly in that space, but she's just a bull at a gate, and she's got a bit of size and speed on, which fits our style of play. But wouldn't it be great to have both? I think that would be a really exciting, team to have both Prepaskis in Geelong colours, not the other way around. That's for sure.
Definitely, you definitely would want that to happen. Now, I want to talk about the mega trade in that trade, but you weren't a part of it. But it was a 11 club trade, 12 player trade, 24 picks involved in all that. What was your reaction to hearing that? Are you ever potentially involved in that, or were you just taking a back seat and just watching it unfold?
Yeah, my role, mate, in that period is to only add value where I'm asked to, in regards to players or needs. Ben Waller, who heads our recruiting and our list development, he was initially involved in that conversation, but we very quickly found our way out of it for different reasons. It's pretty unprecedented to have, 11 or 12 players in a mega trade. Like, one of those only in the AFLW type moments that would happen at this point in time in its kind of development as a competition. But it seems a lot, and I think the AFL are pretty keen to get that done to make sure that there was some equity spread across the teams. But at the end of the day, we weren't too fussed that we were left out of it. Like we got what we wanted from the draft, and if we wanted to be involved, and then I'm sure Ben would have pushed harder for us to be involved.
So I'm sure the AFL loves something like that to a degree. Obviously in the men's trade, but I think it was a 6-club trade or something like that in the previous few years, and then even the women's one having that mega trade. I think they love that little bit of interesting factor going into the last day for sure. Now some players at the Cats that some of the fans should keep an eye out on for the future. Some players outside of the obvious names that are flying under the radar a little bit from a public point of view that the Cats fans should get excited to see in the upcoming years.
Yeah, I think there's a number of them coming through. Like obviously our first season, we drafted a number of our younger players still on our list. So, Darcy Moloney is one that I think has shown some growth over the last couple of seasons in particular, but she just goes from strength to strength. She's such a driven young competitor. So I'll be really keen to see how she progresses over the next months, which is exciting. Zali Friswell is another one who's just floating under the radar. I know a lot said about Mikayla Bowen's game, but I think there's still a lot more that she can deliver with her age and her talent and her ability. So she'd be one I'll be looking forward to see how she grows as well. And then you throw in the Irish girls like Anna Rose and Aisling. I think are going to be hopefully exceptional. Aisling again, like her first year was great, but I'm looking forward to seeing how Anna Rose fits in. And there's obviously Gabby Featherston who's been around the mark for a few years, but again, only 21, 22 years old and still has a lot of the game in front of her. So there are probably some players off the top of my head that I'll be keen to monitor from an outside perspective, and without saying the obvious players that we've got who consistently deliver from week to week. But it's going to be an exciting pre-season, a challenging pre-season for the list. Everyone's hungry to be involved in something which is positive again from last season, or at least to challenge each other to have some similar outcomes, which would be really exciting. So that's all we can ask for is for those younger ones to push the more experienced ones and established ones to make sure they're not comfortable. So it's going to be a really fun. It has been a fun off season. It doesn't feel like the season's finished, to be fair. Like the group have been training, in small groups, large groups for the last 3 months, and I'm sure the club's been doing the same. But it's going to be a really fun season 9.
Definitely, for sure. I mean, you mentioned some names there. I mean, Zali Friswell is one that comes to mind for me, and I agree with all of those names. But Zali obviously having a rising start last year, been really good. Aisling Moloney been fantastic at full kicking, not only goals but obviously having a big impact in the game. And then from the team point of view, how do you feel when you have some players on the AFLW list playing in the VFLW side? Is that something that you have more players do? Will it be more a bit contained about having less players now? How are you with some players playing through VFLW?
Yeah, I think every club has its own strategy and thinking around it. It was tough on the weekend. Our VFLW team, who's coached by atleast Coventry and coached really well, and she's one of our assistants in the AFLW. She's a brilliant coach. Basically playing against Box Hill or Hawthorn's AFLW list, like there was 15 or 16 AFL listed players. So, it can, depending on your strategy and thought around that. Like for us, we're still, 2 months away from a pre-season beginning before we even start in September. So our approach is around giving our players the rest and recovery they need, but also structuring an off-season to give them what they need to get better for their development and growth. But I can understand why teams with young lists are playing them now, is to get experience and game exposure into their list and their squad, which makes sense to me. But there's also risk. There's pros and cons to that. We can have a player hurt themselves at training just like anybody, let alone in games. So, but it's not our strategy yet. We've got our younger players who are playing VFL. So Abby McDonald, I didn't mention earlier on. She'd be another one to watch. As she gets her fitness levels, to the right standard, which she's worked very hard on, and I think she had 39 touches a couple of weeks ago in the VFLW. So she's growing as well in that space. But she's a listed player. Mel Bragg's listed player. Brooke Plummer Gabby Featherstone, Chantal Mason. They're all between the age of 18 and 20. So again, if they don't play now and they're a developing younger player, our VFLW doesn't align to the season. So they'll play now and get games as a 14-game season, or they may miss out on playing football altogether, which would be a real shame. NFL have tried the scratch match option. It is what it is, but it's not the same as playing a competitive 4-quarter game against opposition. So, Bryde O'Rourke will be another one that we look to play, in a couple of weeks in the VFL, just to give her some exposure to, the next level. But it's, in terms of our experienced players, they're very happy with the well-structured off-field, off-season plan that we put in place for our group.
So I think, as you mentioned, those girls between 18 and 20 playing in the VFLW, they're not going to be, guaranteed, I'd say, in AFLW, like not have any games. I think that's a way to do it, how you've mentioned, because, and it gives them that next level below, and then obviously get them game fitness as well. And when you mentioned Hawthorn, they had pretty much your AFL team, you guys, and again, when the fire. Yeah,
sorry, you cut out a bit there, but I think it's the VFLW. It's it's a development program. It's a pathway to try and find the next batch of AFLW players potentially, but also it's a competition that should be challenging younger players to get better, and that's how we approach it. As I said before, like to have Emily Bates play it at Box Hill, that's obviously their strategy and their alignment. But as we've had before, we've had Chloe Shear play. We've had Georgie Rankin play, who's the regular players in our team, our AFLW team, because they just love the game, And that, who's not to say that Emily Bates and those girls just want to play the game because they love it, and that's an option to play. So, but for now, for us, it'll be used as a opportunity to work on the improvement part of our younger players for now until things change. Yeah.
What would you say some of your best successful draft stories since you've been the coach?
Successful draft stories. Look, it's only been a few seasons, but I would have thought interesting. So Shelley Scott was a trade as an older player for us, but it made an immediate impact on our team. Hopefully we'll continue to make an impact with her strength and her leadership, and obviously a lot of time as a captain at Melbourne as well, and successful period there. But, to have her come into our team, all of a sudden there was a shift in mindset around competitiveness and ability and belief. So she's been a big driver in that space. Obviously Georgie, coming in as pick 2, but obviously the number 1 Victorian pick for us was a huge injection of talent. She's incredible, exceptionally talented kid, but also such a driven athlete to leave no stone unturned in regards to her development. And you throw Nina Morrison in the same conversation, those two. Zali bringing her speed to outside run. Mikayla Bowen coming in from WA to give us a bit of run on the outside too. And then you throw in Erin Hoare, Olivia Fuller has done an amazing job to combat against taller rucks week in, week out for 2 or 3 seasons there. And, to bring in some support for her while, to support our midfield. I think our midfield's quite a strong unit, but Erin Hoare at her age and, a few years out of the game, had a significant shift in, again, our ability to get the ball forward, and get our clearance game going. So, I'm excited to see how she, again, rolls into pre-season and gets stronger and more aware of our system, which is important. But I suppose they're probably just a few names that stand out. So it's been a lot of change. Like I mentioned before, we've gone internationally with Rach Kearns coming in from Ireland, and again, it was around the standards part, mate. We need to be stronger and faster and set a bit of a tone in the competition. And when Rach came in, it was a classic. She played as a small forward, but she just she brought in a bit of a fear factor in the way she approached the contest and her tenacity, and then you bring in Shelley Scott to add to that, and all of a sudden we're more competitive for longer, which is what we're after early days. And then we've made like 15, 16 changes over the last 2 years, 3 years. So it's going to take some time to keep gelling together, but they're probably some of the standout ones.
So obviously, the extended season coming up, I think it's an extra few rounds, is it? And again, with the fixture, when can you expect the fixture to be officially announced? Is there a time frame that was given to come out? And are you happy that the season's extending and hopefully, again, more in the future to go much longer than what it is? So, again, you mentioned earlier about playing at least every team once. Yeah,
look, excited like last year with some changes around, game length. So that was a good start to play the game longer than we currently have been. So longer games means more exposure to the game, which is what we want. And the AFL adding an extra game this year to 11 is a good start. Not what the players want. The players want to play more games, but it's a good start. So exciting about an extra game. That's certainly going to help. It's only going to help that the more the girls are exposed to what they're actually here to do, the faster the game will develop and the faster it will become a more recognisable game. I think that's what a lot of punters out there are looking at. There's a lot of comparison between the men's and the women's game. It's not the same. It's never going to be the same. It's still AFL football, but we need to start appreciating the game for what it is. And the more our players can train and play the game, the faster the game will be. It'll just be a greater spectacle. And we can already see it the last 6 months of games. Like season 8 was a great shift in scoring and more free flowing, less congestion. Yeah, there's still room for that to grow, but they just need more exposure to home craft. Hence the off season now. As long as it might be, the girls just don't stop, and it could be another reason why a lot of them playing VFLW, because the need to play is important. So it's going to be a good season 9, I think, coming up in regards to there's just so much more buy-in from teams around what's required to prepare for a season and not just turn up to play the season. So that's a big cultural shift right there.
For sure, I agree. Yeah, you have to want it to improve the season to be more. And you're talking about people, arguing what a fixture is in terms of playing everyone once, and then you could have that problem where people go, "Oh, well, we didn't get to play so and so," they did, and that type of thing. Obviously, can be frustrating once they even. There's no arguments on that side of things.
No, it's a bit. It's difficult as a coach to know who you're going to play. Like you asked a question before, which I didn't answer. Sorry, around the fixture release. It's usually around August, which is, it's one of those ones where we're just not sure until the last moment, and it's like, rightio, we're playing these 11 teams now, and I haven't played this team for 3 seasons, so this will be interesting. And you look at the team dynamic and lists, and they've had such a huge list profile change, and it's like, this will be a bit of an unknown, who you might be playing and how you might combat it. So until it gets to the point where you're playing everyone more consistently, that'll help with that preparation. But usually around August is when the teams, the fixtures are released, and we put our submission in of what we'd like to have. Obviously, we're lucky to play our home games here. So we'll hopefully get 5 or 6 home games at GMHBA, which is a significant advantage, like to play where you train in a really good stadium and facility. But, who we're playing, I'm assuming after making a prelim, it might be a little bit of a tougher fixture for us. But, that's just something that we have to deal with, and we're happy to take it as we go.
Especially a few more questions for you, Dan. So I do really appreciate you coming on and taking some time any time. Defenders, I feel like there's a bit more love. I ask everyone I interview now, so I think it's really important that they don't really, from a public point of view, at AFL, AFLW level, get much of his appreciation as the other positions. Obviously, the midfielders, they've got the Brownlow. Rucks even get recognised. Brownlow votes these days, and the forwards got the Coleman. Do the defenders at both AFL, AFLW level need their own official title like those positions have?
They probably do. Like, obviously, all the clubs will say that internally we give our defenders a big rap, which we do. Everyone has some role clarity, and we celebrate those victories. But yeah, the Brownlow and the AFLW awards, they're generally the accumulators, aren't they? Or they got all the goal scorers. So it's a bit of a thankless job, the defender, but we're lucky to have defenders don't really ask too much, and they're not really after too many accolades or you know, their name in spotlights. But to have, you know, Claudia Konjaka and Meg McDonald, you know, have a really good year again in the air intercepting, you know, that kickstarts our attack. You know, the quicker we get the ball back, and then to throw back Becky Webster to play as a defender from the midfield role and add some speed and run, and a bit of size as well, a bit of grunt. And then to throw Rachel Kearns and her, you know, we're lucky to have a quite a dynamic mix of players who can play multiple roles across the ground. And, you know, Georgie Rankin play defence up the ground. Anna Rose, who's never played the game before, has shown that she can play well. So yeah, we certainly celebrate them internally, mate. But it would be nice to have a defensive role, like, you know, the Golden Fist or something to kind of celebrate the best defender. You know, the most. You know, I suppose the All-Australian team, you know, kind of highlights a few of those defenders around the way they play. But, yeah, it's a thankless job, mate. I wouldn't want to play as a defender. It's just a bit of a thankless job, isn't it?
That's exactly right. I mean, when I played up forward, I just loved the goals, and that was always the thought.
Yeah.
Yeah,
no reward, no risk too. Like, yeah, our forwards don't quite get it. It's like, yeah, you miss a tackle, you make an error, it's no big deal. But as a defender, you make an error, you get crucified.
That's very true. In terms of, if you were in charge of the AFLW, Dan, for a day, CEO, rule would you be adding and or removing?
What rule would I be adding or removing? I'll tell you one thing. One rule, it does my head in, but I understand why it's in. I just don't like the last touch rule across the boundary. I'd rather the AFL umpires just play deliberate if they think it's deliberate. That's one rule that gets on my goat a bit. So I'd change that rule in the day I'm in charge. And the other one is, if I was in charge, I'd be putting the financial money into getting a score review system.
Yes.
Yeah.
I agree with both of them. And yeah, I just don't understand why they don't have a goal review, especially when the games are televised and, you know, you play against like HBA and I, who obviously host AFLW games. So it's like, why don't they have the technology for that, but they can have it for the AFL, and they've got it there already?
Yeah, it's a tricky. I suppose it's a tricky one. Playing with the different grounds, you know, you might be playing in Warrnambool, and there's just no way to put it in, which I understand. But, you know, when you're watching the game on Foxtel and you can just rewind it within 5 seconds and double check, to have that element where there's an option to maybe just, can you give us 10 seconds to check just to be sure, because you've got that facility on hand. I'll be pushing for that to, you know, in any way to kind of just give that a bit more of a supporting role, because it's going to cost in a season where you've got 11 games where your first 4 or 5 games are critical, and if there's some area around that where you can be a bit more clear on those decisions, the ramifications are huge around the outcome. So, you know, just press pause and rewind. Have a look at Foxtel. If it's obvious, we move on. If it's not and we can't make a decision, well, okay, we call umpires call. We at least check in some way, which is what I'll try and encourage to implement.
Absolutely. I mean, if we can do it as a fan from, you know, watching it at home, watching on our phone or whatever, and rewinding and pausing it, they've got the technology to do all that type of stuff.
Correct. I couldn't agree more. So I'll push for that.
Some options there. Now, Dan, this one's so no pressure coming on. It's probably going to be the toughest question you ask, because it's going to be interesting to answer this. So, if you were to poach any player that's currently at the AFLW that's not at Geelong, to join Geelong, who would you poach and why?
Who would I poach from any other club to bring to the Cats?
Unrealistic.
Unrealistic? Yeah, For me, and it might sum up our philosophy, the way we play, or it might be something me. There's a number of players, but, you know, someone like a Belle Dawes for me for Brisbane, you know, who looks like every stoppage or every phase of the game she plays is like the most important part of her game is that moment. And to have that player on your list who can be that ready and that hyped and that able to execute with that passion, I think is a really difficult thing to bottle. So we had that with Renee Gehring over the last 12 months for us, and she's going to be really hard to replace to find that type of player. So for me, you know, strip all the talent and fundamental aside, like to have that someone's tenacity, I think that would be maybe a bit left field, but for me, that would be someone to look out for.
Sure, Dan, that's a really good option. I think Belle Dawes, I think she's only 22, gun mid for Brisbane. I'm sure you when they played you got girls in the prelim gun midfield, and she's got a lot ahead of her. And an excitement machine she seems to be on the field. I actually got to meet her after the granny. Seems to be a well-excited person and a really good choice. Dan, I really appreciate yourself coming on, and good luck with the rest of the upcoming AFLW season. Appreciate it.
No worries, mate. I appreciate you reaching out. So good luck with your remaining interviews you've got.
Thank you very much.